Alright, let's open the case board. These are the 15 standout files, cases, or case categories from the release and the reporting around it. Some are stranger than others. Some are strange because of what was seen. Some are important because of who recorded them. Some matter because they create a pattern. This is not just a weird UFO list. This is a map of the category problem. Okay, we'll start small, because this one matters more for the paper trail than the shock value. At number 15, there's a report involving a circular object with what was described as a crystal-type dome. Now, this is not the case that ends the debate, but it shows how civilian sightings entered official channels. Someone reports something unusual. It gets recorded. It gets forwarded. It becomes part of a historical file trail. That matters because publicly, UFOs were often treated like a joke, but behind the scenes, agencies still collected reports. Maybe this case was misidentified, maybe it was exaggerated, maybe it was nothing, but it still entered the system. At number 14, we go into wartime Europe. This case involves a witness describing a large circular vehicle rising vertically near a German military compound in 1944. And this is where categories become useful. Was it secret technology? Was it a misidentified wartime object? Was it connected to experimental research? Was it a memory distortion? Or was it something genuinely unusual seen near a military site? We don't know, but it sits on the boundary between UFO history and secret military technology. That boundary is important because not every unknown object has to be non-human. Some unknowns may be human, just hidden. At number 13, we get the Foo Fighters. And yes, not the band, although if Dave Grohl wants to come on and solve this one, I'll definitely clear the schedule. During World War II, pilots reported strange lights and objects in the sky. Glowing balls, blinking lights, objects that seem to follow aircraft. Strange night phenomena during missions. This is really important because it pushes the timeline back before Roswell, before flying saucers became a cultural icon, before most people had a ready-made UFO image in their heads. So what were these pilots describing? Enemy weapons? Atmospheric effects? Stress and misidentification? Or was it something else altogether? Again, probably not one answer for every report, but definitely a part of the pattern. And now we leave wartime skies and move into orbit, because the next case shows this didn't stay limited to pilots in aircraft. At number 12, we have the Gemini 7 bogey. Astronaut Frank Borman reported an unidentified object during the mission, with Jim Lavelle also part of the mission context.
Gemini 7 here, Houston 98.
Loud and clear. 7, go ahead.
Bogey at 10 o'clock high.
This is Houston. Say again, 7.
So we have a bogey at 10 o'clock high.
Roger. Gemini 7, is that the booster or is that an actual sighting?
Oh, what?
Say again, 7.
Okay, we have several, looks like the 3 up here, actual sighting.
You have any more information, estimated distance or size?
But we also have the booster in sight.
Understand you also have the booster in sight, Roger.
And we have very, very many, it looks like hundreds of little particles going by the west out about 3 to 4 miles.
Now, space can make ordinary things look strange. Things like debris, ice particles, reflections, components separating, odd lighting, and optical effects. So no, a bogey in orbit doesn't automatically mean alien spacecraft, but it belongs in the serious category because of the context. Trained astronauts, mission communications, and observation made in orbit. That's different from a random anonymous story. At number 11, we zoom out. This broader FBI file matters because it's not just one sighting. It's a long historical collection. Reports, witness accounts, photographs, technical claims, public correspondence, investigative records. That doesn't mean every report was believed. It doesn't mean the FBI solved the mystery. But it does show the subject had enough weight to be preserved. And that creates an uncomfortable question. If the whole topic was always nonsense, why does the paper trail keep going? That doesn't prove aliens, but it does show the subject was not always treated behind closed doors the way it was always treated in public. At number 10, we have the clip that seems to be getting talked about everywhere, the 8-pointed star. And visually, I understand why it's grabbed people straight away. Because at first glance, it does not look like a normal aircraft. It looks like this strange star-shaped object moving through the frame, almost like something out of science fiction. But this is exactly where the whole point of this episode matters. Strange looking does not automatically once again mean alien. Sometimes the mystery is not the object itself. Sometimes the mystery is the camera, the sensor, the heat signature, the optics, or the way an ordinary object is being interpreted by the system capturing it. Reporting around this clip says former Arrow director Sean Kirkpatrick suggested it may be a hot jet engine producing a diffraction pattern in the camera. Now that doesn't make this clip useless. It makes it useful in a different way. Because if this turns out to be a sensor and optics case, it becomes one of the best examples of why we need science before certainty. The public sees an 8-pointed star and thinks, that looks impossible. A sensor expert might look at it and say, that looks like diffraction. Both reactions tell us something. One tells us why the public gets pulled into the mystery. The other tells us why the technical analysis matters. I'll let you guys decide that one. At number 9, we have an object described as football-shaped with radial projections. This one's interesting because it gives us structure. Not just a flash, not just a dot, a shape. And when a report includes shape, movement, location, and context, it becomes more useful for classification. Could it still be mundane? Absolutely. But it belongs in a different bucket from a single light in the sky. And that's the point. The investigation begins when we put things in the right bucket. At number 8, the ocean enters the story. And this is where I start leaning forward. Because I think the ocean may be one of the most under-discussed parts of the entire UFO topic. This case involves a solid white object above water with erratic movement and sensor tracking. That doesn't automatically make it a USO. We're not necessarily talking about something submerged, but it is ocean adjacent. And if water keeps showing up, we need to ask why. Is it because military sensors often operate in maritime zones? Is it because oceans provide cleaner detection backgrounds? Is it because some objects are using the sea as cover? Or is it something else entirely? We don't know. But we should stop treating the ocean as a side note. At number 7, we stay near the water. This case involves a small circular object reportedly flying near the ocean's surface and moving toward land. On its own, maybe not world-changing. But beside the other ocean-adjacent cases, it starts to matter. It's a small object, circular, near the ocean, tracked by sensor, harder to distinguish as the background changes. It could be a drone. It could be contrast or sensor interpretation. It could be something ordinary. Or it could belong in the category we haven't properly built yet. That's why patterns matter. One case is a question, several similar cases become a category. At number 6, we get a stronger movement claim. A UAP reportedly flying just above the ocean and making multiple 90-degree turns. Now, this is the kind of claim we need to treat carefully. Sharp turns can be exaggerated by perspective. Sensors can interpret motion strangely, and data can be incomplete. But if the movement is accurate, it is not easy to explain as passive drift. And even if the answer is eventually ordinary, it belongs in the serious review pile because of the combination. The ocean proximity, reported maneuvers, and tracking context. Now the problem changes again. We move from single objects to multiple objects, and formations raise a completely different set of questions. At number 5, we have 3 unidentified small air contacts over the Arabian Sea. This matters because multiple objects change the investigation. A single object can be misidentified one way. A group behaves differently. 3 contacts maintaining relevant course, speed, or altitude raises different possibilities. Something what looks like a formation may not be a formation. It could be a linked structure. It could be sensor behavior. It could be multiple craft. Each possibility belongs in a different bucket. At number 4, we get another multiple object case. 3 distinct areas of contrast reportedly held a fixed position and orientation relative to each other. This is exactly the kind of case where the question matters as much as the answer. Were these 3 separate objects? Was it one larger object? Or was it a sensor artifact? Was it a formation? Or was it something reflecting or emitting in a way that created multiple visible points? We don't know. But simply calling it a UFO doesn't help. The word only tells us it hasn't been identified. It does not tell us what type of unknown it is. That is the difference between labeling and investigating. At number 3, we get one of the strongest pattern categories: round objects, cold infrared signatures, maritime regions, abrupt direction changes, military sensor tracking. That cluster is interesting because repeated descriptors are more useful than one-off weirdness. Round, cold, infrared, ocean, direction changes. Either way, it should be studied as a pattern, not treated as random trivia. And now number 2 asks a different question entirely. What if the mystery is not just what we've seen, but how it was seen? At number 2, this is where it gets properly strange. A diamond-shaped or inverted teardrop-like object reportedly visible through shortwave infrared, but lost when switching to visible mode. This is fascinating because the mystery may not just be the object. It may be the detection. Why would something appear in one sensor mode and not another? Was it a physical object? Was it heat, reflectivity, atmosphere, a sensor artifact, a material property, a limitation of the equipment? This is where science becomes essential, because the answer may come from optics, wavelengths, calibration, physics, and better data. This is why skepticism and curiosity need each other. If you dismiss it instantly, you learn nothing. If you declare it alien instantly, you also learn nothing. The useful place is in the middle. Stay curious, demand better data, don't be afraid of a strange result. And now we get to number 1. The case category that takes the release beyond Earth and into the Apollo era. At number 1, we have the Apollo era anomalies. This is the one that immediately grabs people because now we're not talking about a light over a field or a sensor track over water. We're talking about NASA context, astronaut observations, mission transcripts, lunar imagery, Apollo era material. Reports around the release have highlighted Apollo 17 material, including imagery described as showing 3 dots in a triangular formation above the lunar terrain. Now we have to be careful. This does not prove aliens were watching the moon landing. It does not prove that there was a base on the moon. It does not prove craft was parked above the lunar surface. There are still ordinary possibilities. But even with all of that caution, the Apollo material matters because it expands the map. This is not just fighter pilots, not just ocean cases, not just FBI reports. This reaches into NASA, astronaut records, lunar imagery, and some of the most historic missions humanity has ever attempted. That changes the scale of the conversation. Some reporting around the newly released historical documents describes extraordinary claims of small beings, unusual craft, recovered material, and witness accounts. But these appear to be claims recorded inside historical documents, not verified imagery, not confirmed bodies, and not proof that the claims are true.